You are listening to Down Home. As me and Jay have had various discussions with Scotians about influential people in their lives, one name kept on popping up: David Woods. Author, actor, playwright, and artist, David's influence in the Black community in Nova Scotia is hard to quantify. His work with youth outreach in the 70s, 80s, and 90s shaped many young minds and has had a positive effect on those generations. David shares some of his time with the Down Home podcast to tell us about his Scotian story.
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground.
Welcome to Down Home, the Nova Scotian experience from two Black men. I'm Derek Wise, and as always, we have Jay Jones.
What's happening?
And our guest for this podcast is David Woods. How you doing, David?
How you doing, Derek and Mr. Jones?
Hello, David.
Jones.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving us a bit of your time. This is awesome. This is something that we've actually looked forward to for a little while. So I'm glad that you agreed to come along and do the Down Home podcast.
My pleasure also. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So you've had such a positive influence in so many Black Nova Scotian lives, especially, up home in the Preston area. Can you talk about what sparked your drive to create so many youth outreach programs in the province?
I was looking for love, brother.
Love conquers all. Yeah.
Yeah.
She didn't want me, so I had to help the community out. It actually began very, it's almost like an interruption, and if I was a little more religious, I'd say a divine interruption, but I was graduating from high school in Dartmouth. I didn't know much about Preston, except, we had a handful of students at our high school.
Yeah.
And there was a summer camp that was being held in Truro. And with the kids from Preston, it was sort of a Black experience summer camp way in the woods, which I never understood, but that's where it was, sponsored by Buff. And they wanted one camp counselor from Dartmouth, because the kids who were going to the camp were primarily from Northeast and Cherrybrook, but there were also some kids from Dartmouth. Yeah. So they wanted one person from Dartmouth. I was the president of student council and, the sort of role model Black guy. And the principal gave my name forward. And it was kind of funny too, because when I remember when I met the other counselors and they were all familiar with each other, because they grew up together and knew each other's families. And then I show up with my West Indian background. I'm not knowing any of them. And I remember the head of the camp said, "You won't make it."
That is
scary. And the great irony was, I did make it.
Yeah.
But so that's, I met these kids. And it was probably my best introduction, because we started with the age 5 and we went to the age probably 14. So I met all that generation.
Mm-hmm.
Every week there'd be a different age group. 1 week girls, 1 week guys, with different age groups. And man, it was just a love affair.
Yeah.
I couldn't get enough of them. They couldn't get enough of me.
Yeah.
I was just totally fascinated, They thought I was a little different because I wasn't, somebody they knew.
Yeah.
And they would tell me stories about Mom Sue's, the lady that lived, I think she was a centurion. She lived to about 105. She was a midwife.
Right.
They said, yeah, she's a witch too. And I remember one girl looked at me one day and said, "Herbie, you know what you need? You need some flour bread." I said, "What the hell's that?" Right? So that's sort of unleavened bread, which is an up-home thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anything they told me was like totally fascinating to me.
Mhm.
you know, and everything I told them, because I was very worldly.
Yeah.
I had studied Black history like the Bible. My uncle was like that, so I was able to, you know, zip off stuff that they, you know, probably a lot of people at that time didn't know about.
Yeah.
And I wasn't showing off or anything. It was just my thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they'd sing me songs. There's one girl named Novelie. We became lifetime friends. Lorraine Kane Novelie. And she used to sing me Andre Crouch's "Take Me Back,"
Mm.
make me cry.
Yeah.
And Rosella Fraser, she was an artist, and I was an artist, and we were like this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And oh yeah, I mean, you know, we just enjoyed each other. And I created some of the camp, trying to find an interesting way to make learning Black history in the middle of the woods in the summertime
Yeah.
interesting to them. So I
Yeah.
divided the camp into 2 groups, and for the whole week they compete against each other for points, and then they get. It wasn't like real competition, but you know what I mean. Every day we do something,
Mm-hmm.
and the points would accumulate, and they get a prize at the end. But one of the things was Black History quiz.
Okay.
You know, guess who?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and they were just with it, man, because it was sort of new to them, and I was new to them, and you know, so that was just one of those things. So when the summer came to the end, you know, some of the kids would leave and say, "Man," they gave me a nickname. I can't say it on air because then other people would call me that. You got to remember, you know, I was with kids, you know, whose nicknames were like Titty Boy and
Yeah.
Ninja Girl and Whitey
Yeah.
Girl. She wasn't white.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so they gave me a nickname. And one of the girls said, "Man, you was a lot of fun." Said, "When the camp's over, you got to come up home."
Yeah.
So after the camp was over, I didn't have a car or anything. I got one of my white friends. She drove me up there. We visited every different house. And then I got to the Fraser house and I never left.
Wow.
This is Mame Rosella Fraser took me in just like if I was a son.
Wow.
And every weekend for time immemorial, I had to be up home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I kind of grew up in a really tough household.
Right.
And I never experienced this kind of openness and love. And, you know, so Mame would call me, "Are you coming up home this weekend?"
Mm.
And I remember on weekends, there would be like 30 to 40 people in her house.
Yeah.
She actually made 2 sets of meals. One for her family. She had 15 kids.
Whoa.
And one for all the visitors,
Oh, wow.
with her husband paying for it all.
Yeah.
So Mame's house, my favorite say, I said, "You guys like the North Preston daycare." I said,
Wow.
every time you got there was a bevy of people outside and inside.
Yeah.
And couldn't, you know, as I said, it just became my second life.
Oh, excellent.
And I couldn't believe the only thing I had been told about Preston. I got here when I was 11 from Trinidad. And the only thing I was told in my white school was if you go up Preston, you get killed. That was
Really?
it.
Wow.
That was it.
Wow.
So here I was experiencing all these levels of history and comedy. They were very, very hilarious people. Like, I mean, their comical nature, you know, the church, all the warmth, all that stuff. But I had only been told that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And I only bring that up because it was sort of like, if I didn't have that intimate experience, I may have never, ever, well, first, I wouldn't have the knowledge to be able to manipulate through that experience, but I also would not have made that level of commitment, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just why I say it was one of those divine interventions, because I was on a completely different path
Yeah.
before that. And then I spent so much time there, I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going in other people's homes and talking just as loud as their home.
Yeah.
Everybody, "Why are you so loud?" Because I'm home, you were having a conversation. It wasn't like people waited their turn.
Yeah.
loudest ruled.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there'd be 15 people talking, and you dumb, you know. So I didn't even realize I had become homish.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that began, and then, you know, because Mame, I call her Rosella, everybody called her Mame.
Mm-hmm.
She always had very serious conversations with me because she understood I was very serious.
Mm-hmm.
So she used to tell me all the stories about her home. 1946, 47, McLean's. Some reporter from McLean's went up there and stayed, I think, 2 weeks, and then wrote in the McLean's magazine. The title of the article was "What Should We Do with These People?"
Whoa.
Yeah. Ironically, it's the only date you can't get in the McLean's archives.
Really?
Yeah.
Every single month for all except that one. And that gave New Road a permanent national image.
Mm-hmm.
You got to remember, North Preston is actually New Road. It wasn't North Preston until like the 90s.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But the sense of shame, because they were introduced to Canada with that article. What should we do with these people?
Wow.
And the stereotyping. If you ever have a chance to read that article, just complete stereotyping. They've had the people talking like they were like, you know, so they've been Step and Fetch It movies. They called the kids pickaninnies. And the people felt so betrayed because they treated the woman like a queen.
Yeah, of course.
And this is what she wrote. And from that time, they were stigmatized. And it was actually a big influence as to why they changed the name from New Road to North Preston.
Yeah.
And your people came from there. You know that, right?
Oh, yeah.
The Wilsons. They actually left North Preston, and it was a back road, actually, not a trail that went to Guysborough Road.
I remember it well.
Yeah. And that, so they originally were from North Preston.
Yeah.
When I left that life, went to college, initially planning to get into law. And then, you know, by my third year, I had an epiphany, you know, all these things I had sort of repressed, my art, my writing, I just shut down. I just couldn't respond to the stuff I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it really was an epiphany. I actually couldn't write papers.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought I was going nuts. Right. I really did, because I didn't know where this was coming from.
Yeah.
And then I remember when it reached the point I actually couldn't function, I had to go talk to my professors because they all knew I was a great student. So they all gave me oral exams instead of written because I couldn't write. But I remember going home at night, and because I couldn't focus on academic stuff, I started doing creative writing and painting, and just flowed out of me just like something that had been there and waiting to get out, and its time had come, and bang, that year, thousands and thousands of, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pages of writing, hundreds and hundreds of doodles and sketches and whatever, all pouring out of me. And I said, I can't go back to school, because my mind obviously was going through some kind of metamorphosis. And ironically, the Black United Front was looking for a youth worker to run a program. And the program was for Black adopted Black kids living in white homes.
Okay.
And teaching them about their culture.
Oh, okay.
And I remember I went to the interview and I said, well, it's not only the adopted Black kids in the white homes that don't know about their culture.
Yeah.
So I said, you know, I said, what would you do if you did? I said, if I was going to do this, because in those days, it was sort of like you did a Black special program for like 6 months, it was over.
Yeah.
There was no expectation of it being entrenched in the system or systematically going on or anything. It was like government gave you a grant, 6 months, a year, or whatever. And then at the end, everybody said how wonderful everything was, and they moved on. I said, no, I want to do it in the schools, because if you do it in the community, it's really whoever shows up
Yeah.
once in a while. I want to treat it almost like a class.
Mm.
And I want to reach every Black kid that wants, so whether they're growing up in a Black, because it's easy to go up Preston and get Black people because that's where they live.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Most of the kids in Dartmouth, they don't live in Black communities.
Mm.
Yeah.
There may actually be more Black kids in Dartmouth, but they're scattered. So I said, I want to do it in the schools because if you do it in the schools, you get everybody.
Right.
You get the Black kids who are Black. You get the Black kids who are Black but never were around other Black people. You get the Black kids growing up in white homes. You get the alienated Black kids. You get the single parent Black kids. You get the messed up Black kids. You get the religious. You get them all.
Yeah.
And I started youth groups in all the different schools.
Wow.
Wow.
And that began a whole other journey.
Mm-hmm.
So it was almost like the camp on a systematic level.
Like an extension, right?
And we started a cultural awareness youth group in the height, around 84, 85. We had 12 youth groups. We got so famous, other communities started calling about how they could start versions of this. So after Halifax, Guysborough County, I remember, and even St. John, New Brunswick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had little chapters, Windsor, because we had our own TV show.
Oh, really? Okay.
Excellent.
We were in the Natal Day parades in Dartmouth. Were you ever in one of those? Did you ever see the Natal Day parade back in the day?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Why don't you tell, both of you saw them?
Well, I remember seeing at least one when I was a kid.
All right, and you know what happened, right? The city of Dartmouth went Black. Every single Natal Day was Black people's vacation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In Preston, you could not find anybody home.
Wow.
Grandmothers. No, like you think I'm joking. People didn't have vacations. People didn't have money.
No.
Yeah.
Natal Day was the day where everybody went to town and stayed.
Yeah.
Picnic, took over all the white people's lawns.
Parks, yeah.
Yeah.
Took over all the parks, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Finley School, I remember the whole of Finley School grounds was Black folk.
Yeah.
But Natal Day was the day because you also, in those days, people didn't have money.
Mm-hmm.
And they also didn't go on vacations. They didn't travel. Natal Day was the thing, man. And people lived. In fact, the camp we still had the camp during Natal Day time. And I remember we now got up to about the 12 to 13-year-olds. And I remember when the kids got off the van, because I was in Truro, the van driver would bring them in. The first thing I heard was one of the kids said to the camp director, "Now, you done told us that we going home for Natal Day, right?" Because they arrived Friday, Natal Day was Monday.
Yeah.
On Sunday, the camp director said, the Black United Front never sent no money.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
Yeah.
That was not pretty.
No.
I'm sure.
4 or 5 of them packed their bags, started walking.
They were out.
In the backwoods of Bible Hill and Truro.
Yeah.
One guy said he was going to burn the campsite down. And if you knew him, he meant business.
Yeah.
It was an open revolt. All the camp counselors raised money and we took them in.
Oh,
Half of them never came back.
really?
But they were promised. And believe me, Natal Day was such a significant thing to them. There was no way, they weren't going to listen to us. That was it.
Yeah.
The minute he said no Natal Day, it was over. They didn't care how, but we would have. If they didn't actually get there, we'd have been in deep trouble.
Yeah. Jay, I don't know if you remember how big Natal Day was in the church, right? Do you remember the picnics
No, I
and
wasn't
stuff
in
like
church.
that?
I remember the
In the
picnics,
church
yeah.
itself?
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
at Cornwall Street Baptist Church, the church that me and Jay went to, that's when that big picnic was Natal Day.
All right.
It happened
So
out
they
in
coincided. Yeah.
yeah, it happened
I
out
guess,
in Oakfield Park.
and you really, later on, I understood the relationship.
Yeah.
Mhm.
that, yeah, lot of these people didn't, you know, they were people you saw in Natal that you never saw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you were a churchgoer. I wasn't.
Mhm.
But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, you would never, you know, and the city literally went like 1/3 black
Yeah. Yeah.
because everybody came out.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned your art.
Yeah.
We were wondering if you could talk about the role that art and music kind of plays in
Yeah,
passing
yeah.
down history and knowledge amongst African Canadians.
Yeah. I was always a itinerant artist from childhood. My uncle, as I said, because I grew up, I didn't grow up with my parents, and I had a very rough go because they didn't really understand me.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember my mother once in a while would send him to bring him in to discipline me because she couldn't do nothing with me.
Mhm.
And he always brought me books.
Yeah.
So he, instead of beating me, and so books on art, books on writers. And so I was always, you know, at that time, I didn't consciously understand what this stuff was doing to me, but I was aware of all the things that was being translated. So I understood about Romeo Beard and African art. I got the real stuff because he always bought, you know, he wasn't the superficial, you know,
Mhm.
this black artist was the first to do this. And, you know,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know, I was learning about art,
Yeah.
not
Black
not
history.
as opposed against what white people achieved,
Yeah. Yeah.
but because my uncle, obviously, he was a lot deeper than, you know, he died before I had an opportunity to actually thank him.
Mhm.
And he obviously had gone through his own realizations because he definitely downloaded everything to me.
Right.
And I was just absorbing the stuff. So I was extremely politically involved when, after the Cultural Awareness Youth Group, a number of people tried to shut that down, not because of the achievement, but because there was some controversy that I became involved in with the Black United Front and the leadership there. And they got rid of the youth groups.
Yeah.
To get rid of me, not because, you know,
Yeah.
and I found that to be so egregious.
Mhm.
The kids rallied and formed their own organization. And then I became the program director of the Black United Front, most of the groups, because I was very politically astute.
Mhm.
But then I realized how petty the politics was. And that people actually didn't want, you know, they would say something, but if you actually delivered because I was into programming, like you know, beyond all the talk, how do you deliver something that actually works?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I could, you know, I hear people talking black all day. That bores me.
Mm.
But when things were being delivered, there was suddenly opposition.
Mhm.
Right.
You were overreaching, Dave.
Mhm.
Oh, you don't really understand. Because now you were clashing against the elite leadership.
Yeah.
Right.
You will get, I remember being at the Black Cultural Center and they banned me from doing press releases.
Oh.
Because, again, I brought new things to the table that the rest of the community was responding to. And
Right.
I was being elevated bigger than some people thought I should be.
Mhm.
So things like that. So after about 3 or 4 different experiences where I was literally being stifled, not because I was either an egomaniac or anything else, but because I was being noticed for being able to do things.
Mhm.
And I realized the pettiness of the politics there, that people really were owned by the system. And they were very grateful whenever the system blessed them with whatever. So even though you could actually do more, they were very oriented to being patted on the head by the government or getting an award from this person and
Yeah.
more than they were self-actualizing.
Right.
And then I saw how flimsy the organizations were. 1 minute they were there, 1 minute they're gone. And so art actually was a conscious move by me because I said to myself, art lasts.
Mhm.
It may not have the power in the moment, but I could, you know, all right, the kids rallied after they got rid of CAYG after 1 year of
Mhm.
great success.
Right.
Had they not rallied, that would have been forgotten,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
and it would have been a footnote.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
the elite, the power structure would have never brought it up,
Yeah.
and people would, yeah. So all that work, all those 12 organizations would have just been something you never heard about.
Mhm.
Right.
So I began to see the fickleness of all that, and I very consciously pushed towards culture and art
Mhm.
to concretize whatever people did. So even with the youth groups, they had to create. Don't care what you do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I actually told them, don't believe in anybody that tells you anything. Do it yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But whatever you do, create something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And man, they had, you know, we set up the system where we did the same point thing like back at the camp. Everything you did, you got points, and then there'd be a bunch of things at the end of the year. They have to create a cultural magazine for their schools. They have to create a performance for Black History Month. They have to create a display. Now, you don't have to do everything, but the more you do, the more points you're able to get, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody said I favored Cole Harbor because I knew all the kids there.
Uh-huh.
And then I remember when Cole Harbor group started rising, the guy at Dartmouth, I said, they won't be beating us next year. So they actually started planning to have the best magazine and
Right. Yeah.
and that just became the thing,
Yeah.
Part of it was outdoing, and the pride, man, like I'm telling you, it would bring tears to your eyes.
That's good
Mhm.
though. Yeah.
Every year the level of what they did, how they did it, just
Got
without
better.
me saying a word,
Yeah. Yeah.
except this is what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were leading
We
by your
actually
example.
won Medal Day. Ironically, we won five float parade awards in Natal Day.
Really?
Yeah, for 5 years straight.
Wow.
We built our own float.
Cool.
And the magazines, and I still have copies of them. The displays, on and on. Some of it is on my Facebook site,
Mhm.
So they went home with this stuff that 2 years ago they didn't even imagine
Yeah.
they were capable of. Then in 1983, we wrote our first play with the kids from QEH for Elsie
Oh, yeah.
Dorrington. People still talk about that.
Yeah.
Then we did the Martin Luther King, and that just blew everything away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we wrote our own Martin Luther King play, it became a hit. And we started the Martin Luther King annual celebration, on and on,
Mhm.
Yeah.
So their creating became a self-perpetuating thing because now they had a tradition
Yeah.
Yeah.
with that. And the other thing that started happening, some of those leaders in our groups suddenly began running for the student councils. So at one time we had like 4 presidents of the high schools.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Augie Jones. I don't know when you went to school, but
Oh,
Augie Jones,
I remember Augie. He's a bit
he
older than
became
us,
the
but yeah.
president. Our
Yeah.
youth group presidents suddenly became the presidents of
Yeah.
the high schools. Doug Sparks in Dartmouth,
Yeah.
president of the youth group and president of the student council. Karen Hudson. It was actually quite a remarkable thing, and it
Yeah.
transformed them,
Yeah.
and it was theirs. They owned
Yeah.
it, and that's why I gravitated towards the arts,
Okay.
because I figured it would last,
Yeah.
and people owned it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Whereas I could invest in an organization, and because of politics, it could be upended,
Yeah.
and you may never know. And then as I got more into it, I started looking at the history of things. So I started investigating the history of Black art in Nova Scotia that people felt was a non-entity, and ended up finding stuff from the 1800s right through.
Can you talk a little bit about New Brunswick?
Oh,
What is sort of the Black history involved there? Like you just mentioned the
yeah,
artists.
I began working with New Brunswick a little more intimately last year. I'd always been aware of New Brunswick, because I said in probably '84 the St. John group wanted to join CAYG, so we used to do exchange visits. Go
Okay.
visit. So New Brunswick is a little different because they don't have institutions the way Black Nova Scotians do
Right.
Okay.
to preserve a lot of their things, you know.
Mhm.
So we have a very entrenched church system,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of political and social organizations, and so I think it's harder for New Brunswickers to maintain that kind of identity because they live in little pockets where they're very overwhelmed
Right.
in terms of their culture. They don't, you know, the evidence of their culture is not there, you know.
Right.
So
Okay.
you would find right now would be the first time they're doing a lot of their first.
Right.
They just did the first play about anything in New Brunswick,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think in February.
Okay.
Very, you know. So that is the difference. It's a very interesting study, you know, of a place because they were New Brunswick and Nova Scotia were actually one province at one point.
Yeah.
So they were settled in the same way, and then they split.
Yeah.
A lot of communities have been, I wouldn't say partially expropriated. I think one of them was expropriated because they were building a dam.
Mm-hmm.
But places like Elm Hill, where they lost, you know, they're no longer communities. So I was researching Edward Mitchell Bannister, and he was, you know, if you Google Edward Mitchell Bannister, he's the first African American to win a major art prize, the Centennial Medal. He was a co-founder of the Rhode Island School of Design,
Okay.
a whole bunch of things.
Mm-hmm.
Born in New Brunswick. I go to his, you know, I phone his hometown to find out about. Never heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I go to actually his hometown, St. Andrews, New Brunswick, to the museum. Turns out the museum is the home of the family that adopted him after his parents died.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
So the museum was the man's home, and they knew nothing about it.
Oh.
Wow.
Now they do.
Yeah.
They don't
Of
admit
course.
they didn't know. But when I
Yeah.
first started, and then so I was there last summer, and so I was asking about the Black community that he emerged from, because both his parents died, and then he was adopted by this white family. The name slips me right now. Will come back to me. And they said, "Oh, the last Black person died in 1950, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And when people tell me that, I mean, I'm familiar with Scotia. And when you tell me the last Black person died, that just means it's Black people that ain't Black. That
Yeah.
ain't saying they Black.
Oh yeah.
So you know us.
Yeah, I know.
We leaves descendants.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
All right, now you may not want to own up to it. Brothers ain't known, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm going there because St. Andrews by the Sea, which is a very famous resort,
Yeah.
and it's that famous hotel. I think it was actually on a stamp. The golf course covered up the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Black community is under the golf course.
Oh, my
man.
gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I want to find out because everybody's sort of dead silent about the Black community, and they used to call it Slab Town.
Okay.
Slab Town.
Slab
That's
Town.
interesting. Wow.
And it's
Yeah.
a very similar story to, I don't know if you're familiar with Charlottetown.
Yeah.
They had a place called the Bog
Yeah, I heard of the
that
ball.
was
Yeah.
I heard of the bog.
expropriated,
Yeah.
where people said there's no Black people left.
Mhm.
And then one of their descendants, Dr. Hornsby, who physically looks white,
Mhm.
wrote, and everybody walk around say, "Oh, didn't know all these families came from Black."
Mhm.
So it's almost the exact same kind of situation, and they call that the Bog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole Maritimes is just loaded with, man, it's kind of a really miscreant kind of stories about communities that were destroyed, covered
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
Shunted. One minute you were no man's land until they wanted you, and then,
Yeah.
and then silence.
And
Yeah.
it's silenced. Yeah.
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 Priceville. I don't know if you ever saw the documentary called Priceville.
No.
No.
I haven't.
Yeah, there was the exact same thing happened to a community in Ontario.
Okay.
It was a brilliant documentary. Speakers for the Dead, I think it's called. Jennifer
Yeah.
Holness.
Okay.
If you Google Jennifer Holness, filmmaker, and
Yeah.
exact same thing. The Black community, they expropriated, took over their land. And why this was so egregious, they said one guy took all the gravestones from the Black cemetery and made and put it in his basement as yeah. But if you watch that documentary, but that was the fate of traditional Black communities in Canada.
Right.
It wasn't just in the Maritimes.
Yeah.
No.
There was sort of a written rule that they be erased.
Yeah.
Wow. That's horrible, man.
Yeah.
Horrible.
And you know what? Also Vancouver with Hogan's Alley. So it was quite a consistent experience wherever we were close to white towns or that whites now wanted our land.
Mm-hmm.
Just a complete erasure.
Yeah.
Like you didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happened in the States as well, like during the Jim Crow area, like the businesses down there were thriving and, we
see the Wall Street thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Black Wall Street.
Yeah. So, but the whole idea that there was never any sense of pride in even saying that there was Black folks, like the collective identity of all these places always wanted to erase
yeah.
Black presence.
Yeah.
Now you hear people saying, "Oh, they're proud that they got Black people," but that was not our experience up until recently.
Mm-hmm.
All these towns, we were no man's land.
Yeah.
We existed in spite of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
And every time something was done, it was to get rid of.
Yeah.
So overall, I mean, you emigrating to Nova Scotia obviously had a big influence on your life. And can you speak about those experiences? Like, I mean, and talk about finding yourself.
Well, Dad should have bought me a winter coat. I'll tell you that much.
That's true.
I got off the plane on December 10th, 1972.
Wow.
In my Trinidad spanking little shirt.
Yeah. That's a homecoming.
Those were tough times. Me and my family were not made for each other. In many ways. I arrived at John Martin School in the north end of Dartmouth. Population of about 600, maybe 10 Blacks.
Yeah.
The first group of the people that adopted me was Shannon Park, Wallace Heights, the Army brats.
Wow.
They were racist and didn't know they were racist. Or maybe they knew they were racist, but they didn't understand what racism was. Because they had a Black bus driver that they tormented every time he had their route.
Right.
The poor man, I remember Mr. Glasgow, and Mr. Brooks having to come and identify the kids the next day who were calling them nigger.
Oh, yeah.
So they were driving the bus.
Right.
They did some very casually racist stuff. When they told me, you're not like the rest of them, Dave. And at the same point, they embraced me like nothing. Looked after me. When I ran for the student council, that was my obis.
Yeah.
And believe me, I was Black. Like, what I mean is, I was not one of these guys that was trying to fit into the white world. So I was looking for love, as I told you, wherever I was at. Right. But it wasn't from being apologetically anything. Because I had been nursed in Blackness. Right. I started a Black youth group in my high school.
Right. Yeah.
Population 1,800 whites and 25 Blacks. So everybody knew this is Dave Woods.
Right.
But the same people that lived that life treated me like a king.
Yeah.
And So there's always this duality, right?
Yeah.
One girl, because I just joined Facebook, I'm a technophobe and I don't like modern stuff anyway, but I was stuck in the house because I couldn't
Yeah.
travel.
Yeah.
And one of my artist friends said, "You should join Facebook." So I finally did. And all these Dartmouth High people, that's why I was so grateful, because they hadn't been part of my life for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of them was a really close friend. Her name is Diane McDougall. And we started talking about the old days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I would just mention like some of the things I was going through, even hanging around them,
Mhm.
and she just had no clue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She said, "Say, oh, I'm so sorry you went through," so this is why I mean people can be a part of something and not even have a consciousness of what that, I mean, I'm not saying they're not guilty. I'm saying they actually don't have a consciousness of racism. So they would make racist jokes. Because you got to remember, when it was completely majority white,
Yeah.
when there was no black teachers, when there was no black programs, when there was
Yeah.
it was a different world. It's not like today.
No, of course. Yeah.
Somebody says something, you have a process for complaint.
Yeah.
They might get away with it, but it's not from it being accepted.
Mhm.
I went to schools where the teachers were making black jokes.
Jeez, man.
And there was no way of resolving that.
Yeah.
There was no appeal. I used to read all my English textbooks beforehand, all the stories, so that whenever there was a black reference, I would leave the class.
Really?
Right.
Because the very first experience I had, and you got to remember, I came in December. So let's say maybe within 2 or 3 weeks, they were reading a short story, and they said the guy went coon hunting,
Mm-hmm.
raccoon hunting.
Yeah.
The whole class turned around and laughed at me.
Man,
Really?
that's horrible.
Mm.
So after that happened once or twice, I wouldn't have no part of that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I'd get up and ask to use the washroom when I knew, because we used to read the stories out loud.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I could deal with a lot of things, but I couldn't deal with the casualness of this. Somebody said, "Oh, they talking about you, Dave."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The teacher didn't say nothing.
Yeah.
Said there's nothing you could appeal to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 11, 12 years old,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
right? So it ain't like I can get up there and do a Martin Luther King speech.
Yeah.
Today would be a whole other thing, boy. That whippersnapper Dave would have put something on. But at that point, that's what I was. But I said the same people, man. My first Parker jacket came
Mhm.
from Carl Cameron, whose mother saw me one day, because I don't know why my father wouldn't buy me winter clothes.
Yeah.
But the mother, next day, he came along. "Hey, my mother sent this for you."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They talk about me like very same people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tough.
And we're lifelong friends. I said when I got to Dartmouth High and ran for student council there, the whole of Shannon Park Ballers voted for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were considered, the bad part, North End, Dartmouth, Shannon
course.
Park, Army
Yeah.
brats. And
Yeah.
it was all the rich kids. They
Yeah.
were in a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
I swamped them, those rich folks. And I'm saying I had a good personality. That wasn't even the issue. But I'm
Right.
also telling you that people we had, for example, slave auctions in our winter carnival.
What?
Seriously?
Yes.
My God.
Did you know that was a tradition in Nova Scotia?
No.
No, I didn't know that.
Winter
I didn't know.
carnivals, they would have something called a slave auction,
What?
where you bid on students, and they would be a slave for the week.
Oh my gosh. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I remember, because these are things that I recorded in my mind, didn't have a process to undo. And I'm probably the only guy you would ever hear it from, because people didn't. I pay attention to everything,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
and there's nothing that went by that if I couldn't change it, I at least
Remember it.
recorded
And,
it
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for posterity.
yeah. Of course.
But
yeah.
I remember, because I remember being really offended. But again, you got to understand the context of the times. This was not a time where you had a platform
Mhm.
for articulating Blackness
Mhm.
or any power base.
Mhm.
The system had worked to the point where there was never any Black teacher. If there was a Black teacher, they would only have one.
Yeah.
And I don't know what schools you went to. The inner cities were probably better than the rural areas. They never hired Black teachers.
Mhm.
Later on, there would be, I said, programs that actually acknowledge Black stuff. But back in the 70s, no.
Yeah.
And I remember sometime in like the 90s, the high school principal at QEH banning slave auctions because I remember somebody had complained. So I knew at least at that school there was one because I remember there was a public statement against it.
Right.
But I had grown up in both junior high and Dartmouth High
Mhm.
with as part of the Winter Carnival. Again, this is what I call about the blindness.
Mhm.
Now, they
Yeah.
were doing this without, I was probably the only person who was seeing it on a racial level.
Right. Right. Right.
There was Black kids being auctioned,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
and quite happily so,
Yeah. That's so bizarre.
because it was a sign of popularity if you got bidded on really high.
Yeah. Of
Yeah.
course.
But obviously, what were the origins of this?
Yeah. Exactly.
See what I mean? But
Yeah.
there was a complete blindness
Mhm.
to that stuff. So as I said, even if I talk to some of my white compatriots that I grew up with, I could mention 10 or 20 different little things, and they would always be like, wow,
Yeah.
didn't know you were experiencing that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Right.
stereotypes have always sort of been the way in society
Yeah.
at some point, and we often play up to them, and
Right,
they become embedded in our
yeah, oh yeah, and
subcultures.
people's mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that,
it was really sad, and I even see some friends now, and I remember they growing up, and they were just trying to fit in, man.
yeah, of course,
Yeah.
it's
And,
all about
and
survival.
I hate to say it, they were like, wow, they were going to some lengths.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I was embarrassed.
yeah.
But for them, it was trying to find a niche.
Hmm.
in
Now
that space.
you spent you worked at Buff, so you spent time in the North End
Oh
of
my
Halifax.
God, yes. I
What-
lived there too.
So what difference did you see between the two communities across the bridge?
Yeah.
What
You mean in
difference?
terms of Preston or my community? Which one?
No, like the North End of Halifax
Versus,
versus where you went to high school in Dartmouth,
oh,
like the
well,
North End of Dartmouth.
I lived in a white neighborhood.
Yeah.
So that was, it wasn't no Black anything there except, later on more Blacks moved in
Yeah.
from Preston. But when I was coming up, it's little pockets of Blacks on Creighton Avenue, Black wasn't an issue in Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, in terms of as a population, not like North End Halifax. I mean,
Right.
probably about 1/3 of the population, at least in the Garden Street area. You'd probably be about close to 1/3 of the population.
Oh,
Definitely.
for sure,
And
most
streets.
definitely.
And if you went to school, I went to a school with 2,000 people, and there might have been 25 Blacks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you went to QEH back then, you would have what, 200?
At
Yeah.
least.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a big difference. I worked with kids from the North End, but you see, I don't recognize boundaries. So
Yeah.
me, it's just a task,
Right, right,
Mhm.
right.
I hooked up with Terry Simons, God love him.
Yeah.
Worked at the North Branch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Man said to me, after they'd gotten rid of the youth group, he said, "I'll give you office space in the basement.
Mhm.
You do my Black history stuff at the library in exchange."
Yeah.
The next year, he says, "I'll get you a full-time salary, run all my Black history programs for the library."
Oh,
Mhm.
wow. Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
So I was a worker.
Yeah.
And I didn't see, I'm in love with my peoples, right? So I don't care if you gave me I was hanging in Downeytown, right? Where they said, I didn't even know I was in Downeytown.
Yeah.
I said, oh, you go down the road? We don't go down the road, which is some of the hardest part of North Preston.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the North End.
Mhm.
Man, it's all stereotypes. Man, people are people.
Yeah, it's true.
I remember, man, and people were always amazed, how this guy show up and do all this stuff? Because I actually offered people something they were interested in.
My brother talked about you as well, Corey
Who's
Skinner.
your brother?
Corey Skinner.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, he's my half brother. Yeah.
You mean the rapper?
No, well, Corey.
Oh, he's not a rapper, but
No.
he worked with me when I did one of the rap contests.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well,
That's why I called him the rapper. Corey was cool.
Yeah,
I remember
he's-
his big announcement.
yeah, he's
Some
in.
guy called himself Local Dre.
Yeah, that was.
Corey ran into the room.
Yeah.
Local Dre is here.
Yeah. I remember Local Dre. He was from my neighborhood,
He was
Spryfield.
very excitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Corey. But he
Yeah.
caught me on the tail end. I had left CAYG and then I came back. So he didn't get the full blast.
You've been, listening to your story is amazing because you're in some ways, forgive me, but here's the way I see it is you're a true testament of whatever you resist persists. Just when you were talking about, how your art sort of came through you and everything like that, when you didn't feel quite right with the direction you were heading. So what I mean is that you're such an inspiration in the fact that what you did with your art helped you in your life as as helping
It clarified my life too.
Yeah, and
it wasn't just them.
Yeah, no, I know. And
Yeah.
and it helped the kids sort of find some passions and find something to be involved in and learn.
People started seeing themselves.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
learn about your blackness.
in a much bigger light.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing.
I mean, Doug Sparks ran for the school board at age 23
Wow.
when there was no black designated school board thing,
Mm.
and all the CAYG kids were his his assistants and things in a white neighborhood and won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they began seeing themselves
Yeah.
in a bigger light,
Yeah.
And the thing I said I always feel proud about, they all owned it.
Yeah.
They felt they owned
Who they were.
that vision. It wasn't
Yeah.
Dave Woods telling them.
Yeah.
Because I never said a word. I just said, you got to do stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would provide you with all the, we had the quiz games where you got to learn your history without you really knowing you're learning your history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did the debating tournaments where they were introduced different thoughts. Because I never said nothing. I tell people all the time, I don't need to preach.
Yeah.
It's all about you.
Well, that's awesome. That was an amazing story, David, man. That's an amazing story. And again, thank you very much
No problem at
for
all.
lending us a little bit of your time.
Yeah.
Inspirational, man.
Thank you. And, you can have me back.
All right, yeah, definitely. We will. All right. Well,
All
Jay
right. Jones,
Jones, you want to take us out or you?
Yeah, well, let's just take it out real quick. Like David Woods, thank you so much for sharing your story. You're an inspiration. And you're a griot. You're telling these stories and you're teaching these kids, and you have taught your kids, and now you're doing it for yourself. And it's just awesome to see. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate being here.
Yeah.
And we're coming to Toronto next year with our quilt show.
Oh, we'll be
at
there
the
for
Museum
sure.
of Textiles.
Yeah, you let us
Awesome.
know.
Let us know.
Yeah. Boy, do I
And-
have some stories connected with those quilts.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, we'll have you on sometime for a part 2, and you
All
can
right.
talk more about those quilts.
Quilts,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure. Or
definitely.
maybe one of the women.
Yeah, exactly. That too.
Yeah.
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground.
You have been listening to Down Home. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Breaking new ground, 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 yeah. On a high plateau, from the one down below to the future of the funk, getting lost in the flow. Contact with the spark magex. Now it's time to flex with the force from the soul, reaching all aspects.
The song
getting deep, no
breaking new ground from the breakdown.
The blaze, it's a fire inside. A brand new path, breaking down the sum to one. Feeling free, I just laugh with the joy of a beat boy, just kicking it live. A connection so strong, transcribed with the vibe like magic prescribed.